Okay. And give a second for everybody to come back in. We're picking up where we left off from the last live stream. Give a second for everybody to come in. All right. So we left off at Matthew chapter 5, verse 12, stating that we should be joyful because we have a great reward in Hashemayim. Because the prophets before us were persecuted the same way, as being reviled, spoken evil of, saying we're not of God, we're of Satan, and all other forms and manners of scoffing and mockery. Now, what these same people tend to do, what they tend to do is, all right, JGD, welcome. Asha Shabbat. Glad to see you back. So picking up where we left off, what these same people tend to do is they also destroy the prophets of old as well in their rhetoric, right? I think we spoke a little bit about that before I had to end the live stream. However, they go to destroy the prophets. They speak evil of the prophets. You know, there's a lot of our people of the diaspora who are under that Nicolaitan doctrine, right? Many of them will go to the extent of destroying our forefather Jacob and putting the label of him being a deceiver. Yeah, because of how he got the blessing from Esau. They'll go to the extreme and say he was a deceiver just for that act, which was all orchestrated by the Most High. You know, so they'll go to those extremes as well. You know, I personally had a conversation with a woman last year, right? A woman I knew of, no longer associate with her. But we had a brief dialogue pertaining to the Bible. And she even said this out of her own mouth. You know, and she was referencing from some anti-Christian book that she's been reading. And the author of that book is an Edomite. She, if you look at her, you know, she pretty much of the diaspora. You know, she's from the seed line of Jacob herself, but she's underneath that strong delusion. And, you know, I don't even know how we got to her even mentioning Jacob being a deceiver, but when she did, I just seen the devil. I just seen the devil that's on her just show itself through her vessel. It literally morphed her face in real time. I'll never forget that. It contorted her face So much so that when she did it, she stuck her neck out as she said that Jacob was a deceiver, being hard-hearted and haughty. I remember, I'll never forget that. Out of all my interactions with her, that interaction stuck out the most. I can't remember too much else of what I even spoke with her about, but you know, I ended that dialogue with her pretty quick and cut her off, excommunicated her, you know, but nonetheless, that's a prime example. That's a prime example of how these same individuals will go to the extent of destroying the prophets. And these same individuals say they believe in the Messiah, but the Messiah himself said he doesn't destroy the prophets. He didn't come to destroy the prophets. He says that in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. You know, a few verses down to where we left off in verse 12. Hold on, JGD. My interface on this streaming app is crazy. It's not what I'm used to. So bear with me as I try to read your comment here. Okay, you said that was a lesson to me that they called Mashiach a devil. That's crazy. Well, yeah, they said he had a devil. They said that he was possessed. They basically said he was crazy. But yeah, they called him that. You know, the same thing that they did to the prophets before he walked the earth in the physical form is the same thing that they did to him. You know, so don't think it crazy that they do it to you as well, with you being a disciple yourself of Mashiach, with Mashiach being your head. And if I remember correctly, JGD, you mentioned that you went to a Christian university and you were trying to speak truth to them. Is that right? I hope you didn't do that anytime recently, because I would take it that you've been in the truth long enough not to do something foolish like that. That was recently, or was that in the past when you did that? What's the con to? It was last year. Okay. Yeah, man. It's not worth trying to get this truth across to the anti-Christians. That's what I'm going to call them. Those in the Nicolaitan doctrine, especially among our people. You know, unless the Most High orchestrates it to where they're willing to receive it and they actually receive it sincerely, there's no use to talk with them, because by the spirit and by the doctrine, they're stupid. You said doing that was a lesson to me. Man, I'm gonna have to change this interface because I can barely read your comments, but that don't mean stop commenting. I just gotta play around with the settings of this when I'm done with this live stream, because it's not what it used to be when I used it a long time ago. The view of it's stupid. They done changed stuff around and made it look stupid. So let's see here. Okay. You say you know better now. Yeah. Yeah, it's no use to have a dialogue with an anti-Christian or anybody else that is not of the truth. There's no use, because it's just going to go into a back and forth. They're not going to get it because the Most High is sealing it from them. You know, one thing that they're not going to tell you in religion, or even in that Nicolaitan doctrine, is that the Most High chooses who he wants to know his truth. He chooses whose mind becomes open to his truth. So all these Israelite niggas that get on these different platforms and do debates, they're just doing it for money. When you see other Israelites debating with the anti-Christians, or they're debating with Muslims or anybody else of a different religion outside of the truth, they're doing it for clout and money. So don't get tied up into that. That's all entertainment. Those individuals you see doing that, they're getting paid to do that. They're selling out. We are not supposed to be going to any back and forth debates with anybody who's not of the truth. Don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't give what's holy to dogs. So, yeah, I'm glad you learned from that, JGD, because if you would have kept up with that, you definitely would have destroyed yourself. If you would have kept trying to run to all these different Christians and try to teach them the truth, that most definitely probably would have sifted you out the truth, because it's foolishness. It's foolishness to do that. We're not supposed to be trying to force this onto anybody. Whoever can receive it will receive it. They have to be chosen of the Most High in order to be able to receive this truth and receive this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Man, let's get that in the scriptures. Let's go to the book of Isaiah, verse 29. Book of Isaiah, chapter 29, starting at verse 9. And you already know to drop that 7 in the chat when you're there. Man, this okay, this mess is acting stupid. Now I can't see y'all's comments. What is this? Okay, I got it. This is Isaiah chapter 29, verse 9. Drop the 7 in the chat when you're there. Isaiah 29, verse 9. All right. It says, stay yourselves and wonder, cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. So all these individuals who are not in the truth, who are in other different winds of doctrine, they're drunk off of those doctrines. They're staggering and they're stumbling off of those doctrines. So it's just like trying to talk sense into a drunk person. If you ever try to reason with a drunk person, a person who was just drunk out of their mind, they can't stand up, they're incoherent. It's like speaking to a wall. Anything you tell them can get blown out of context. They can get emotional. They won't completely grasp the true understanding of whatever you're trying to tell them. That's the same with them. Okay, verse 10. For Yahweh hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes, the prophets and your rulers, the seers hath he covered. So they've been placed in a deep sleep. So therefore they can't hear you. They can't hear this truth. Most High doesn't want them to know it for whatever reason. He doesn't want them to know it. So therefore you can't force it on them. You know, that's why I said at the beginning of the video when I was out and about, all those people playing soccer over there, I was not going to go set up my post near the field and try to profess all this to them because they're drunk in their folly playing soccer. And again, they all look like teenagers. So it must have been some soccer program that they were involved in. But nonetheless, their parents are full of folly. And that was the result with them out there playing soccer in the morning of the Shabbat. Verse 11. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. So this truth is sealed to them. It's sealed away from them. You can try to break down the scriptures, break down the doctrine all day long. They're not going to understand it and they're going to reject it. Verse 12, and the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. Verse 13, wherefore Yahweh said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their hearts far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. So JGD, when you went to that Christian university and you called yourself ignorantly trying to profess the truth to them, that's the reason why. Isaiah 29 verses 9 through 12. So through the Spirit, you learn appropriately that you can't do that. However, there's many other people that weren't blessed enough to learn from that. And they kept trying and they kept trying and they kept trying. And they got sifted out the truth trying to do that. So there you have it. Isaiah 29, verse 13 is really the conclusion to that. They're taught by the precept of men, the Nicolaitan doctrine. They believe their pastor before they believe the word of God. Their pastor or their religious leader, they believe them. They look to them as the Most High. So there you have it with that. Now we're going to jump to the book of Sirach. Sirach chapter 1, verse 29. Sirach chapter 1, verse 29. That's Ecclesiasticus, aka Sirach in the Apocrypha, chapter 1, verse 29. I'll give you a moment to get there. Sirach chapter 1, verse 29. Cool. Be not an hypocrite in the sight of men, and take good heed what thou speakest. So all these individuals who say we're not under the law, or their objection is, oh, that's the Mosaic law. Well, we learned earlier that the Messiah said, if you can't hear Moses, you can't hear me. So therefore, these same people that have this ideology and this attitude are hypocrites before men. They're hypocrites. And the Messiah made them hypocrites by stating the very fact in John chapter 5 that if you can't listen to Moses, if you can't take heed to the law, which Moses was a custodian of, then you can't hear me. But what they'll try to do is, oh, it's all about Jesus Christ. It's all about Jesus Christ. but yet they despise the law. Hypocrites. Hypocrites they are. And they don't take heed to what they speak. They don't take heed that what they're speaking and their doctrine is very hypocritical. And now you have a lot of them that are listening to us. They listen to us, and then they try to take that knowledge and put it back with their vomit. The vomit of the anti-Christian doctrine, aka the Nicolaitan doctrine. They run back and try to mix it all up, and then they just make themselves even more foolish. Man, let's get that in the scriptures. Let's get that in the scriptures, because that's also been spoken of in the scriptures. We're going to go to 2 Peter. Let's go to 2 Peter. Second Peter. Let me see. Bear with me. 2 Peter chapter 3. Yep. 2 Peter chapter 3, starting at verse 15. Okay, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. If you're there, go ahead and drop 7 in the chat. Second Peter chapter 3, verse 15. All right. An account that the long suffering of our Adawan is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them as these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction. So that's what's happening to these anti-Christians among our people who are listening to the prophets, who are actually tuning in to the Israelites in secret, learning more scriptures, right? But then holding on to that vomit of the anti-Christians. They are destroying themselves from being unlearned. They're wrestling with the scriptures. Yes, sir. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 16 is indeed fire. It explains the hypocrisy and the folly of our people stuck in that anti-Christian doctrine. That's what's going on here. That's why you can't get through to them. They're destroying themselves. You know, just like the video I did earlier this week on that lady out here in Houston, that young lady, she's been listening to us. But then in her folly, she tried to come back onto social media on her platform and try to profess judgment that she heard from us as if she had the authority to do so. That's what it means when they destroy themselves, being unlearned and wrestling with the scriptures. She was indeed doing that. She was destroying herself. She's putting herself in the line of destruction by doing that. But many of them are doing that now. They listen to us, they get learned in other scriptures, and then they try to mix it back in with that Nicolaitan doctrine, and it's just a recipe for disaster. Let's go back to Sirach chapter 1. So we just read Sirach 129. Now we're going to Sirach chapter 1, verse 30. Drop 7 in the chat when you're there. Sirach chapter 1, verse 30. I'll give you a few more seconds and I'll begin reading. This is Sirach, chapter 1, verse 30. Exalt not thyself, lest thy fall, and bring dishonor upon thy soul. And so the Most High discover thy secrets, and cast thee down in the midst of the congregation. Because thou camest not in the truth of the fear of Yahweh, but thy heart is full of deceit. Yeah, a prime example of that is what happened with that one individual, the leader of Sakari last year. Sirach chapter 1, verse 30 was that's what happened to that man there. You know, and he's only gotten worse since then. I've seen a couple of videos of him. You know, he wants to be a gangster now. That's what he about. He about that thug life now. But you know, if you were in any truth of the matter, you already knew that congregation was going off. You already knew it. Because for one, a lot of their brothers that they had out there were prophesying with their heads covered. That's a telltale sign that somebody's in folly. When they're prophesying the Lord's work and they got a damn hat on their head, or they got a damn smog covering up their whole head to where you can't even see the crown of their head. The crown of their head is completely covered. And everybody who does that, the Lord shows them to be false, one way or the other. The Most High reveals their folly because they exalted themselves. As Sirach chapter 1, verse 30 told us not to do. They exalted themselves. They're saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and preach this word the way I want to preach it. I'm going to stay fly while I'm doing it too. I'm going to put this cap on my head because I want to look fly. You know, I'm trying to get me a second or third wife. I'm trying to get me a couple of concubines. So let me go ahead and look fresh to death while I'm preaching this word. Exalting themselves and dishonoring their head, who is Yahweh Ha Mashiach. That's what's happening there. And you got to pay attention to that. If you're not paying attention to that, then you're going to be led to destruction, one way or the other. And their leader, Sakari, was the prime example of that. Now we're going to Proverbs chapter 6. We're going to Proverbs chapter 6, verse 12. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 12. I'm going to give it a moment. Let y'all drop the sevens in the chat when you're there. Cool. So we're in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 12. A naughty person, a wicked man, walketh with a forward mouth. So we'll go back to that congregation. They rejected the teachings of Paul as a congregation. The Sakari group did. They rejected the teachings of Paul, and they also rejected Yahweh Shah to a degree, saying they don't worship him. Worship is to serve. And with us being the underling of Yahweh Shah, we reverence him as the only begotten Son, in ultimate reference or reverence to the Father. So that was another error in their doctrine. And now they don't exist anymore. The Most High completely dismantled that group. Nonetheless, you had the other two. They started another congregation, and now they way off into folly, and they back into the Nicolaitan doctrine, trying to blend the doctrine of Mashiach with the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. They're in even more folly. And what's his name? The deacon I forgot his name. He always had his head covered. Every time you seen that man on camera or you seen them out and about, dude always kept the cap on his head. So all you different Israelites out there listening to these so-called prophets, and they showing they got the number one telltale sign that they're false, and you still listening to them, you a special deal of stupid. Okay, you're a special deal of stupid if you listening to any of these Israelites who got their head covered. You're a special deal of stupid. Now, I can understand giving some grace, giving some grace to a brother who may be doing that, giving them some grace, taking what they say as a grain of salt, taking the meat from the bones. But it's only so long you can do that before, it's undeniable that they indeed are false. It's only so long you can give that grace until, you can no longer deny that they're false. And especially if they call themselves some type of teacher of this word and they still doing that, they don't know any better, to take that damn cap off their head, to take that damn scarf off their head. Nah. You're a special deal of stupid if you continue to support them or listen to them. I can understand grace, but if they don't change, and they're supposed to know that, and they even talked about it themselves, and they gave some offhanded excuse as to why they can do it, yeah, man. Yeah, what you listening to them for? What you listening to them for? They false. Verse 13. So Proverbs chapter 6, verse 13. He winketh with his eyes. He winketh with his eyes. He speaketh with his feet. He teacheth with his fingers. What does that mean? He speaketh with his feet. He shows you in his actions. He teaches with his fingers. He shows you with his actions and his fruits. And this prophesying with your head covered is a prime example of speaking with your feet and teaching with your fingers. Winking with your eyes. Working all type of manners of mischief and folly while professing to be some messenger of the Most High. Verse 14. Forwardness is in his heart. He deviseth mischief continually. He soweth discord. We've all seen that. And by the way, this same Israelite group that we just finished talking about, the Sakari, they celebrated, I think this was a couple of years ago, they celebrated a Passover in the strip club. They celebrated a Passover in the strip club. And you wonder why the Most High dismantled them brothers. I don't even call them brothers. You wonder why the Most High dismantled them niggas. Yeah, JGD, they did that. It was a couple of years ago. They had a Passover celebration in the strip club. Yep. Sure did. So Proverbs chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. Well, 12 through 13. We're moving on to 14 now. And it reads, forwardness is in his heart. He devises mischief continually. He soweth discord. We've seen all these fruits from that particular organization. We've seen all these fruits. Verse 15. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken without remedy. And that happened to a great degree already to the leader of that particular organization, and he's only waxing worse and worse. Now the same is happening to his underlings. I can't think of the deacon's name, but the other guy's name, Hassad or whatever. Yeah, it's happening with them too, because now they're mixing the Christianity with the truth of the doctrine. And they're all doing it for money. They're all doing it for money, and they're doing it to cater to the heathen nations as well. They're trying to get money. It's just a whole money grab. That's all it is. But nonetheless, Proverbs chapter 6, verses 12 through 15, identifies individuals like these men to a T. You know, that's all I have. That's all I have to conclude the lesson that I started with this morning. But nonetheless, I may get back another video later on today or tomorrow. Just got to go by the Spirit. I don't ever do these by my own will. I let the Spirit guide me. So, you know, we'll see what we have. Yes, sir. Ayan Dabar. May peace, serenity, and prosperity be multiplied unto you all. Shalom.